Hi Year 11, so today we're going to be looking at social influence and we're going to be starting chapter 10, so it's a different topic. So if you're making your notes, you'll need to do a different Word document. So in psychology, the term social influence is used to refer to the ways in which others influence our thoughts, feelings and behaviour. So you're essentially looking at why or how other people actually influence the way you think and feel. So social influence is defined as the effects of the presence or actions of others, either real or imagined, on the way people think, feel or behave. The impact of social influence may be constructive, helpful, destructive, harmful or neutral, have no effect. So it's pretty much saying that sometimes people can influence you in good ways, sometimes in bad ways, sometimes they have no effect whatsoever. However, there is a certain degree of pressure when it comes to social influence, and it could be slight to intense, that is exerted on an individual to change their thoughts, feelings or behaviour in some way. And this is usually because, you're part of a group. So suppose two people are in a shelter waiting for a bus. They're alone in the shelter, sitting at opposite ends of the bench. Neither is looking at each other, but each is aware of each other's presence. They're not considered a group. And the reason why they're not considered a group and there's less likely that they'll influence each other is because they're not interacting with each other. They're not talking with each other. They're not, they're just waiting for a bus, that is it. So they have one goal, but the rest of it is not presence. So two people jogging together each weekend could be considered a group because they may interact with each other. They have the same goal, right? People queuing up to use the ATM, they're not necessarily considered a group, right? But they all have the same goal. They may interact, but they're not considered a group. So psychologists believe that a group is more than a gathering of people. Although definitions vary slightly, there is generally a general agreement that a group is any collection of two or more people that interact with and influence one another and who share a common purpose. So in a couple of the ones that we've shown before, they had a common purpose, but they didn't interact and they didn't influence one another. So the number of people doesn't necessarily dictate that they're a group. You could have 1,000 people who don't talk to each other all in the same place, but they're not considered a group. So what is more important is that for a collection of people to be called a group, the individuals involved must also interact with for longer than a few moments and influence one another. They must also share a common purpose or goal. So you have to interact with one another. So let's just say, for example, you happen to be going out, to the ATM to get money out, and you may say hi to the person in front of you. But you've got no interaction really. And there is no influence on one another. So social psychologists often use the term collective to describe a gathering of people who have minimal direct interaction. So a collective might be a group, might be people that go to a live band. They're more of a collective rather than a group. It could also be considered as a mob. Alright, so members of a hockey team, they're a group. Psychologists attending an international conference, they're not a group, they're just a collective. Cyclists participating in a race, they're not a group. They're not interacting with one another, they're not influencing one another. A duo of singers is a group because they have to interact with one another. 150 VCE students in a school, they are not a group, they are a collective. You don't interact with everybody, you don't influence everybody, so you're just a collective. A church congregation is not a group, right? You may interact with some, but you'd be a group within that collective. 3 friends who live in the same house, you'd have to be a group because at some point you're going to interact. 23 looters raiding a store during a civil riot are not a group. They're rioters. That's bad. Campers at a caravan park are not a group. Shoppers at a shopping centre are not a group. Shop owners At a shopping centre, not a group, and 16 Swedish spectators with the same face paint together at the Australian Open tennis tournament are a group. So within each group, each member can have an identifiable status. So think of all your friendship groups. How often do you have certain certain people that plan everything, certain people that, have more power than others. So status refers to the importance of an individual's position within the group as perceived by members of the group. So there'll always be people who have higher status and people who have lower status. So think about your family as well. Who out of every single member of your family has got the highest status, right? Do you consider yourselves equals in terms of power? Do they have similar amount of influence or control over the other? You'll probably find that your parents probably have the highest status and, the youngest child has the lowest status. So status amongst group. So an individual status can have an important effect on their behaviour towards others in the group. So if you're of a lower status, there is a good chance that you're not going to be able to influence the other members of the group. There's also a good chance that if you're of a lower status, you are not going to be able to, speak up as much as what other people are or affect change as much as others. So status can specifically affect expectations that individuals have of each other's behaviour and how individual group members relate to one another. Think of yourself in your own group. There'll always be someone, and please be nice to these people, there'll always be someone who is on the out, right? They're usually the person that doesn't say as much, is usually in the background, and that's usually because they feel that they're of the lower status, right? They have less influence over other people. And this is usually because they have less power. So a person's status in a group also determines the amount of power that they have within the group. So power refers to an individual's or group's ability to control or influence the thoughts, feelings or behaviours of another person or group. Think about it when you're in the yard, right? And at lunchtime, I know it was a long time ago, right? When you're in at lunchtime and you find that, one of your friends wants to go to the canteen. You don't particularly want to, or there'll be people that don't want to, but they go anyway because one person really, really wanted to. So the less status you have, the less power you have. So types of social power. Psychologists have identified different types of social power. If a person has control over something you need or want, then that person has power over you. The type of power used by an individual usually depends on their specific role as well as specific situations. The status of an individual may also affect the type of power used in a specific situation. Often more than one type of power is used simultaneously to exert influence. And I'd strongly recommend that you actually put this table into your notes. So reward power is the ability to give positive or consequences or remove negative consequences in response to a specific behaviour. So this could be an employer, this could be a teacher giving reward and punishments, right? So this is usually reward power. Coercive power is the ability to give negative consequences. So to remove positive consequences in response to specific behaviour. Teachers giving a detention, employees removing their jobs. It could be pretty much anyone who can remove a negative consequence or ability to give a negative consequence. Legitimate power usually has some sort of authority, and these people are known to actually exude authority. They have the right to do, give positive and negative consequences, and they can pretty much do whatever they want, and usually they're in a uniform. So it could be you know, a police officer, could be a teacher, could be army, whatever, right? So legitimate power, they have the ability to exercise their power, right? There's not much that you can do to change it. So I have the authority to give out detentions, whereas other people do not, right? Referent power, these are the people that you want to identify with or be liked by. So essentially it would be, okay, so, you know, celebrities and things like that. Expert power is that you have special knowledge and skills that are desirable or needed. So once again, teachers, but it could be somebody who has a lot of authority, or they're the trainer, whatever. So let's, for example, you could have a personal trainer. Informational power is having resources or information that are useful and not available elsewhere. So it could be, you know, somebody who has the experience that you need to learn from. They're not necessarily teaching you very much. It's just more along the lines of they have information that you need. So make sure you put that table into your notes. Alright, so influence of status and social power within groups. Status and social power within a group are often linked to the role each individual has within the group. A role is the behaviour adopted by an individual or assigned to them that influences the way that they function or act in different situations and life in general. A role is a part an individual play in life that carries with it expectations of how to behave in different situations. So if you're one of the lower status people, that means you have lower power. Let's say, for example, you happen to be in, you know, a class or in a meeting of some kind, or even in your friendship groups. There is an expectation that those people who are of a lower status, right, are going to have, you know, an expectation that they won't have any influence, they won't have much of a say. And we have an expectation that they'll maintain this particular role, right? We expect people with higher status to actually take charge. So once a role is taken on, there is usually an expectation by other members of the group that an individual will behave in that way is consistent with that role. So if you happen to be of the lower status and then all of a sudden you start being, you know, really out there, there is a good chance that you are going to have some issues, right? So if you start making demands and trying to influence people, it's not going to work. So these role expectations have a strong influence on an individual's behaviour within a group, especially when their role provides considerable power and status. So, Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. Now, I would strongly recommend that you watch that video because you need to know about Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. It's very, very important. He pretty much looked at the whole idea of the status within prisons. And he worked out that given if individuals, just plain ordinary individuals, were given more power, there is a good chance that they would abuse that power. And they also worked out that the prisoners, and they were just college students, would actually assume the role of, you know, the lower status individuals, despite the fact that they weren't actually lower when they started off. Alright, so here are the learning activities. These may change depending on what's happening, so just keep an eye out on the weekly plan.